Can Swedish fashion be successful in the American market? Today we will attempt to answer this question by presenting to you the market entry plan for John Henric, a menswear fashion from Sweden that is entering the United States. My name is Jacqueline Silva, and these are my teammates.
I'm Maria Sue.
I'm Katie Pajak. And I'm Shakira Teflani.
Okay, so just some information about the company. It's a Swedish menswear line that's been in operations for 3 years. The headquarters and showroom are located in Sweden. There are 50 retail shops, 3 web shops, and there's a developing website. The company is not public. It has a slim budget. There are no external investors. It started with just a $12,000 US budget, and it has grown exponentially since then. The company funds itself through a combination of retained earnings and credit from the bank. In terms of sales have increased an impressive amount of $560,000 US in just 3 years. And this is really good considering the slim investment that was done initially. So the company's philosophy and mission, it's that life is all about meetings and interactions, and clothes are essential to this communication. The designs include both luxury, elegance, and the most careful craftsmanship. There's a real focus on comfort and the perfect fit, and about simplicity, and they're really targeting a go-getter personality, someone who's ambitious and confident and knows what they want. The target demographic, just before I go on, here are some photos from the ad campaign, just to give you an idea about the brand and kind of what the vibe is. So the target market is a Swedish man in his 30s. He's a successful businessman who's confident, ambitious, as I said, successful. This is in line with the company philosophy that I mentioned earlier, and that's outlined on their website. The Swedish competitors are Amanda Christensen, Eden Stenström, and John Henric actually also sells other brands such as Hugo Boss, Ralph Lauren, and Gant in their stores, but John Henric products are about 20% cheaper than these other brands. Their current foreign market expansion is still limited to Sweden and Scandinavia. There are 2 retail stores in Norway and 1 in Denmark, and this is done through an agent who is seeking to look for new stores to sell John Henric products in. They also have a fashion show in Denmark to get their name out to the European customers, and also they attend fashion fairs, which is another way to promote their product name. The expansion, as you can kind of tell, is done mostly through personal contacts and networks.
So now that we have the environmental overview of John Henric, we can now go on to why we're deciding to enter into the US, which is such a mature market. So first of all, we have to talk about Sweden and why the environment in Sweden is so successful. So Sweden is and will remain one of the most stable countries in the world because its democracy has been uninterrupted for so long. It's a collectivist culture, so everyone in the country is working together to benefit the country as a whole. And also, Swedes don't need to save as much money as consumers in the US because they have a lot of social benefits, as many European countries do. So some fashion trends in Sweden. Swedish men are very fashionable and shop very often. The average Swedish man in his 20s spends around $400 a year on clothes. Sweden is the largest exporter of clothes within the Scandinavian countries, and many Swedish brands have internationally integrated into other markets, such as brands Acne and Wired. The largest menswear brands in Sweden, however, are H&M, MQ, and Dressman, some of which we see here very popular. The US environment is a very individualistic culture. We have lower tax rates than Sweden and Europe, but we have less safety nets. So consumers in the US have to think about saving for retirement and planning for their children's education, whereas in Sweden and the rest of Europe, they don't have to think about that as much. Consumers in the US are making less money because of the recession and the lack of jobs, but they're taking on more credit, so they're spending more and going into greater debt. So the US is basically attractive because of its political stability and its maturity, which those are 2 main things where when investors come in, they really like to see that the US is a stable country. But the disposable income in the US has dropped by 0.2%, so the market is not as attractive. So now we can go on to a main competitor of John Henric. So Ralph Lauren is very well recognized in the US and around the world. Its strengths are that it has a large market share and its brand recognition. However, because it's such a global company, it has weak exchange rate losses and it's dealing with that through its profits. But they can launch new lines and expand its products because of its brand recognition. However, they have to remember that Ralph Lauren depends on their revenues from its licenses, which they don't own. So they also have to think about how much they own and how the licenses bring in most of their profit. As for John Henric really emphasizes its style and uniqueness, and one major fact is that it does have a lot of budget constraints, but when entering a market, if it can develop its own brand recognition and clientele, it can really expand. But John Henric will also have to think about its competitors and how many competitors are in the US market.
In developing our market entry strategy, it is important to weigh the pros and cons of each entry approach. In this presentation, I'll show you each of the options that we considered as a team and why our selection of exporting using an agent and participating with a department store specifically located in New York is the best option for John Henric. The best way to enter the U.S. market is via exporting because it is cost efficient and allows for the highest amount of returns for our company. Licensing is not favorable as it overwhelms John Henric's budget, what Shakira just previously mentioned, reduces potential returns, and limits John Henric's participation in marketing and branding of its clothing line. A joint venture would also be detrimental, especially in the fashion industry, as intellectual property of a designer is really all that it has. In deciding to export, our team compared the costs and benefits of an export management company versus those of an agent. While an EMC handles all aspects of exporting operations, shipping, logistics, and marketing, it does so at the cost of John Henric's autonomy and is too expensive. The superior option, therefore, is an export agent directly exporting in the United States because an agent is more affordable and focuses specifically on entering and promoting the brand in the market, which is the U.S. In researching how to set up export options, our team discovered the best option for John Henric would be coordinating with a department store. Boutiques are not efficient because of extremely high startup costs and high risks. Also, the cost of owning a boutique doesn't fade away with time. It's consistently expensive. Shadow work under another label also is not the best avenue for John Henric to enter into the United States because specifically with U.S. consumers, it does not increase the credibility of the designer. Our team specifically focused on Nordstrom as the most beneficial entry into the United States. A partnership with Nordstrom would provide many benefits, including a low startup fees, entering into a pre-existing network of relationships with not only designers but also stylists and magazines, and it allows John Henric to enter into the region, which I'll talk about next, New York, with starting up with more than one store in that specific state. New York is the best market for John Henric to enter within the United States, for as a fashion brand, New York is the fashion capital of the U.S. There are over 10 fashion magazines and the top 10 influential magazines for fashion in New York out of all of the United States. And there are 30 million people, so that's a potential customer base is quite large, not to mention tourism, which comes specifically to New York just for shopping. New York also holds our two segments, which will have a two-pronged approach as to how to target the market. For Wall Street is located in New York, so there's the 30-year-old up-and-coming businessman, which is really in line with the strategy John Henric uses in Sweden, and also Generation X and baby boomers, who have the largest amount of disposable income and spend the most habitually on retail.
Now we'll move on to the brand strategy and marketing mix. So in general, an overview of our brand strategy is targeting the upper middle segment of the U.S. menswear, competing with brands like Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, and Brooks Brothers. So their prime competitive advantage will be the Swedish differentiation. So in terms of standardization versus adaptation, we will be bringing over the whole line, but adapting, as I mentioned, will be the European flair. And the line will be all the way from dress shirts down to socks.
When looking at the product line that Rhea just mentioned, we focused on 3 main components as far as comparing prices: shirts, ties, and socks. What we did is that we took the lowest priced items from each of John Henric's competitors, which are right here, and made sure that they were of similar quality. What we discovered is that John Henric is actually 30% cheaper than Ralph Lauren, yet only 1% than J. Crew. In this example here, we have 3 shirts. They are, initially you can see that Ralph Lauren is the most expensive at $85, followed by John Henric at $80 and J. Crew at $65.